What happens when a wife vanishes for just an hour with her male friend at a family wedding, and her husband searches the venue in front of everyone? Why does he stay calm when everyone blames him, only to answer quietly, weeks later, with something lawful and final? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Mirelle Houghton, and I still don't understand why everyone turned on me over one small mistake at a wedding. I didn't disappear. I just needed a break, some air, and maybe a little attention that I wasn't getting at home. Aaron always stood in corners, quiet, serious, like fun was beneath him. When Eli asked me to help him find his jacket, I said yes without thinking. It was harmless, or it was supposed to be. By the time we came back, Aaron had searched the entire venue. People were whispering, phones were out, and suddenly I was the villain who humiliated her husband in public. I tried to laugh it off, told everyone he was just being dramatic, but the look on his face wasn't anger. It was distance. He stopped raising his voice, stopped reacting at all. That silence unnerved me more than any fight ever could. I told myself he'd calm down, that I could spin it, explain it away. But something in him had changed. He started keeping notes, locking drawers, staying up late. I thought it was petty. I didn't realize then that every quiet moment was him preparing for the day he'd stop being silent. The band was already playing when I walked into the reception hall, lights flashing over the dance floor, laughter spilling from every corner. Everyone looked beautiful, like a commercial for happiness. I wanted to feel that too, to look like I belonged in it. Aaron was talking with the groom near the buffet. Same grey suit he wears to every event, same polite smile that never reached his eyes. He looked tired, older than 36. I waved, but he only nodded. That was him lately. Quiet, controlled, unreadable. I told myself I wouldn't let his mood ruin the night. Eli waved me over from the bar. He had that easy grin, shirt slightly unbuttoned, a drink already in hand. We'd gone to college together. He always knew how to make me laugh. I joined him for one quick toast. Just one. It turned into two. Then three. He said I looked too perfect to be someone's wife, and I laughed, said he was too bold for a guest. It was harmless flirting, the kind that reminds you you're still noticed. The band switched songs, and he asked if I wanted to see the balcony view before dinner started. I hesitated for half a second, glancing toward Aaron. He was already looking away, so I said yes. The balcony overlooked the river, fairy lights tangled around the railing. The night air was warm, the kind that feels like an invitation. Eli handed me his jacket when I shivered, all charming and casual. I told him he'd make someone a great husband someday. He laughed and said that sounded like a rejection. I said I was happily married, even though the words didn't feel true in my mouth. He leaned closer, not close enough to cross a line, but enough to make me aware of it. I checked my phone. No messages. I told him I should get back before Aaron started worrying. Eli said I had time, that nobody noticed. And maybe he was right. It felt good to be unseen for once, free from expectations, from Aaron's measured tone and careful routines. I let myself linger too long, watching the lights dance across the river, pretending the night was mine. When we finally walked back inside, the laughter sounded different, sharper, thinner. People were glancing at us. My sister Nora gave me this little raised eyebrow look from her table. I ignored it. Aaron wasn't at the buffet anymore. I scanned the crowd, expecting to see him chatting somewhere, but he wasn't anywhere. Then I heard my name from across the hall. One of the bridesmaids asked if I was okay, said Aaron had been looking for me. My stomach flipped. I found him near the entrance, talking to the venue manager. His face was calm, but his jaw was tight. When he saw me, he just said, "You disappeared." I said I'd been outside getting air with Eli, that he was overreacting. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at Eli, then back at me and said, "You could have told me." I tried to laugh it off, made a joke about him turning into a detective, but it didn't land. People were watching, waiting for a scene. I felt trapped between defending myself and keeping up the act. I told him he was making a big deal out of nothing, that everyone disappears for a few minutes at weddings. He said quietly, "You weren't gone for a few minutes." That tone, calm, almost kind, was worse than anger. I crossed my arms and told him if he couldn't trust me, maybe he shouldn't have come. His eyes softened, not with guilt, but something like finality. He said, "I'll remember that." Later, I sat with Nora, pretending to scroll through my phone. She whispered that Aaron had been searching everywhere, even asked the DJ to make an announcement before changing his mind. I told her he was dramatic. She said he just looked worried. I said he liked being the victim. That shut her up. I smiled at the guests who kept glancing over, like everything was perfectly normal. When the speeches started, Aaron stayed seated, clapping politely but saying little. Eli avoided my table completely. I told myself it was fine, that the awkwardness would pass once everyone had more champagne. But every time I looked at Aaron, he was calm again, too calm. He leaned back in his chair, like he'd already made some quiet decision. On the drive home, he didn't play music. I talked about how beautiful the wedding was, how nice it was to see old friends. He nodded, eyes on the road. I said he needed to relax, that people were already teasing him for being so protective. He asked if that was what I told them. I said it was just a joke. He said nothing after that. When we pulled into the driveway, he went straight inside without waiting. I followed, annoyed by his silence. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, rinsing 2 mugs like he always does before bed, one for him, one for me. I said we should talk about the night before it turned into gossip. He said quietly, "It already has." I asked what that meant. He said people notice things when you vanish. I told him if he trusted me, he wouldn't care what people thought. He said, "Trust doesn't mean pretending nothing happened." I told him he was acting like a stranger. He said, "Maybe I'm remembering who I was before all this." I didn't like the way that sounded. I tried to tease him out of it, asked if he'd at least admit he overreacted. He smiled faintly and said, "You'll see." Then he took his mug and left it on the opposite counter, away from mine. I stared at it, confused. It was such a small thing, but it felt deliberate. When I went upstairs, I heard a faint sound from the guest room, a printer starting up slow and steady. I knocked on the door and asked what he was doing. He said, "Just catching up on things." I laughed, said he was addicted to work now too. He didn't answer. The machine kept humming. I walked away before I could look closer. Lying in bed, I checked my phone again. Social media already had pictures from the wedding. Me on the balcony, laughing in Eli's jacket. The caption read, "Beautiful night, unforgettable view." My chest tightened. I told myself nobody would care, that people forget fast. Still, I couldn't shake the image of Aaron searching through that crowd, calling my name. For someone so quiet, he had looked desperate. When he finally came to bed, it was late. He didn't lie close. He stayed on his side, facing the window. I whispered that I was sorry if I embarrassed him. He said, "You didn't embarrass me. You embarrassed yourself." I wanted to snap back, to defend myself, but the word stuck. He turned off the light and said goodnight like it was just another evening. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee downstairs. His mug was already washed, his phone gone from the charger. Only my half-finished cup sat on the counter. The printer light in the guest room blinked faintly, a single sheet of paper half fed into the tray. I pulled it out. It was blank, clean and perfect. Still, my hands shook as I slid it back. Something in that quiet, that calm, felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. The morning felt staged, too neat, like someone had wiped emotion off every surface. Aaron was already gone, the bed perfectly made on his side. His mug sat upside down on the drying rack, mine half full beside the sink. A small detail, but it felt like a message. He had finished his part, I had not. I tried to shake off the thought, told myself he was just being tidy. Still, I found myself scrolling through photos from the wedding before I even brushed my teeth. There I was, laughing in Eli's jacket, the lights glowing behind me like something cinematic. Comments were rolling in, so beautiful. Goals, you two look amazing. No one meant Aaron and me. At work, the office buzzed about weekend gossip. I was halfway through a meeting when my coworker Tessa leaned over and whispered, "So, did your husband really look for you all over the reception?" I froze, smiled too wide and said he was just being protective, that everyone was reading too much into it. She laughed but looked unsure. Someone had posted a video of Aaron walking through the crowd, calling my name once before the camera cut away. It was only 15 seconds long, but it spread fast. I told myself it was harmless. People love drama. I called Aaron at lunch, expecting him to pick up. He didn't, straight to voicemail. I left a message, light and teasing, asking if he'd forgiven me yet. When I checked my phone later, there was a missed call from an unknown number and a silent notification. Calendar updated, downtown, 11:15 a.m. I didn't remember setting it. It was labeled meeting, personal. I assumed it was a glitch, something from work. Still, when I tried to delete it, the system wouldn't let me. By the time I got home, Aaron was in the kitchen again, laptop open, fingers moving across the keyboard. I said I'd made spaghetti, hoping to sound casual. He said he'd already eaten. I asked if he wanted to talk. He said, "You already told everyone your version." I laughed softly, asked what that meant. He said, "You'll figure it out." Then he shut the laptop. I asked if he was angry or embarrassed. He said, "Neither." I told him silence wasn't healthy. He said, "Then you'll be fine." I tried to turn it into a joke, saying maybe we should hire a couples therapist, that people were already making memes out of the video. He didn't react. I told him I could spin it to make us look cute, that people loved redemption arcs. He asked if I ever got tired of performing. I said I wasn't performing. I was just surviving. He said quietly, "That's what I'm doing too." That night, he stayed in the guest room again. I heard a faint tapping sound. Printer, maybe. I thought about knocking, decided against it. Instead, I opened my phone and posted a short caption with one of the balcony photos. "Married life means trusting your partner's sense of humor." It got likes instantly. I told myself that meant I was right. The next morning, Nora called. She said Clara had phoned her, worried. Apparently, someone from the wedding had sent Clara the video. I groaned, said people needed to stop gossiping. Nora said Clara thought Aaron looked heartbroken. I said she always dramatized everything. Nora asked if I'd talked to Aaron. I said yes, plenty, that he was just embarrassed, that we were fine. I didn't mention the separate mugs or the locked door or how he'd stopped saying my name at all. When Aaron came home that night, he seemed calmer, almost polite. He asked if I'd paid the utility bill. I said yes. He asked if I'd used the joint card. I said of course. He nodded and wrote something in a small notebook. I asked what it was. He said, "Just keeping track." I teased him about becoming obsessive, asked if he was planning a surprise. He said, "Something like that." I poured us both wine, trying to soften the tension. He didn't drink his. I told him we could start over, go out for dinner somewhere nice, show people we were fine. He said, "You care about how it looks. I care about what it is." I said those weren't opposites. He said, "For us, they are." I wanted him to argue, to show something, anything, but his face stayed unreadable. I told him I couldn't live with someone who treated me like a stranger. He said, "You already do." I slammed my glass down and said I wasn't the only one making mistakes. He said, "That's true." And that was worse than denial. Later, when he went upstairs, I checked his laptop. The screen was locked, but a few notifications were visible. Cloud sync complete. File uploaded successfully. I didn't know what it meant. Probably work stuff, I told myself, even though he'd never synced anything before. Around midnight, I heard the front door unlock. For a second, I thought he was leaving, but it was just the sound of him checking the lock again. He did that every night now, testing, verifying, recording small certainties in a world where I'd made everything unstable. The next day, I left early for work. On the counter was a sticky note in his neat handwriting. Bring forms. No explanation. I snapped a photo of it, meaning to ask later what forms he meant, but forgot. At lunch, Tessa showed me something that made my stomach twist. A post from one of the wedding guests captioned, "Even the calm ones break eventually." It showed Aaron outside the hall, talking to someone in a suit. The angle made it look serious, almost official. I tried to laugh it off, said maybe he was ordering a taxi. Inside, I felt cold. When I got home, the house smelled faintly of toner again. He was upstairs, door closed. I called through it, asking if he'd seen the post. He said he didn't check social media anymore. I asked if he'd seen the comments about him. He said, "Let them talk." I said he was letting people think he'd lost control. He said, "Maybe I stopped trying to control the wrong thing." I didn't even know what that meant, but I hated the calm way he said it. I shouted that he was making this worse by acting mysterious. He opened the door, looked straight at me, and said, "Not everything needs your narration." Then he shut it again. That night, when I scrolled through my feed, I noticed something odd. Someone had tagged me in a thread. "When your husband searches, and you're nowhere to be found." I reported it, deleted comments, blocked names. I told myself people were just jealous of our marriage. Before bed, I checked his phone while he showered. The same calendar reminder flashed again. Downtown, 11:15 a.m. The location was saved this time, just a street address, no label. I copied it into mine. Maybe he was meeting a friend, or worse, a lawyer. The thought made my chest tighten, but I shook it off. Aaron would never do something so formal over a misunderstanding. When he came out of the shower, I smiled and asked if he wanted breakfast together tomorrow. He said he had plans. I asked what kind. He said, "Personal." I laughed, said he was being secretive like he had a mistress. He just looked at me and said, "No secrets, just order." Then he turned off the light. The next morning, I woke up to silence again. The only sound was a low mechanical whir from the guest room. I peeked in. The printer spat out one sheet, then another, then went still. All blank. A pile of them sat in the tray, crisp and untouched. I almost laughed. It was like he was testing how much emptiness he could produce. I told myself it didn't matter, that I still had control of the story. But as I stood there, the smell of ink in the air, I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd called me by my name. By Wednesday, everyone at work had already chosen sides without saying it. When I walked into the office kitchen, the chatter stopped just long enough for me to notice. Someone had printed the photo of me and Eli on the balcony and taped it to the break room board under the word "found." I ripped it down before anyone could see my hand shake. Tessa said people were being childish, but she didn't look me in the eye. I spent the morning pretending to work, glancing at my phone every few minutes. Aaron hadn't texted since the sticky note. No good morning, no anything. The only thing new on his calendar was another entry. Follow-up, 2:45 p.m. I told myself he was just organizing. He liked to overcompensate when he felt ignored. But something about the precision, times written like they meant something, made me uneasy. During lunch, I met Eli downtown for coffee. He looked nervous, checking his phone like he expected someone to appear. He said people were messaging him too, asking what had happened at the wedding. I told him to ignore it, that people love drama more than truth. He said Aaron must be furious. I said Aaron wasn't the type to get furious, that he just managed things. Eli frowned and asked what that meant. I didn't know anymore. When I got home that evening, the house felt colder. Aaron was at the dining table surrounded by papers, neat piles labeled with sticky notes: household, bank, utilities, storage. He didn't look up when I came in. I said, "Are you reorganizing again?" He said, "Just documenting." I laughed and said, "You sound like an accountant." He said, "Accountants don't lose track of things." I asked if we could go out for dinner, maybe talk somewhere neutral. He said he already ate. I told him I was worried about him. He said, "Don't be. I'm not the one people are talking about." That stung, but I refused to give him the satisfaction. I said everyone overreacted, that no one cared anymore. He said, "You care enough for everyone." I grabbed one of the papers and saw columns: dates, times, short descriptions: reception 6:47 p.m., missing. 7 to 12 p.m., located balcony. 7 to 16 p.m., returned. My throat tightened. I said, "You're tracking me now." He said, "I'm tracking facts. They survive better than feelings." I told him it was creepy. He said, "It's clarity." Later that night, I called Nora. I told her Aaron was turning into some kind of robot, writing everything down like a police report. She said maybe he was trying to process what happened. I said, "He's weaponizing it." She told me to stop turning everything into a performance. That word, performance, hit hard. I hung up before she could say more. When I came downstairs, Aaron was gone, but his laptop was still open. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen. I recognized tabs titled Expenses, Archive A, and one marked with my name. I reached for the mouse, but before I could scroll, the screen locked itself. I stood there, staring at my own reflection in the black glass, wondering when we'd stopped being on the same side. The next day, I overslept. When I rushed downstairs, Aaron was at the counter, tying his tie. I said, "You're up early again." He said, "Routine helps." I asked what the follow-up on his calendar was. He said, "Nothing you need to worry about." I laughed, said he was acting like a secret agent. He said, "You'd be surprised how much privacy people ignore until they lose it." At work, Tessa stopped by my desk with a careful expression. She said HR wanted to talk to me. I panicked, thinking someone complained about the wedding gossip, but it was about something else. Someone had sent an anonymous email to the office manager claiming I'd used company time for personal meetings. Attached was a time-stamped screenshot from the security lobby camera, me leaving with Eli. My stomach dropped. I went straight to Eli's office. He swore he didn't send it. I believed him, mostly. I said it didn't matter. They couldn't prove anything. But the way he avoided my eyes made me feel smaller than I wanted to admit. When I left, my phone buzzed. A message from Aaron. "Dinner at home tonight. Please be there." The politeness in it made my skin crawl. That evening, the lights were dim when I walked in. Dinner was on the table. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread. He was already seated, laptop closed, hands folded. I said, "This feels like a setup." He said, "It's dinner." I sat down, trying to match his calm. He asked if I'd had a good day. I said it was fine. He said, "Good. I like facts that check out." Halfway through the meal, I couldn't take the silence. I said, "Are you collecting all this so you can win arguments?" He said, "There won't be arguments." I laughed and asked what that meant. He said, "You'll see soon enough." I told him he was scaring me. He said, "I'm not the one who should be scared." I stood up, furious, said he was acting insane, that people would think he'd lost it. He stayed seated, said quietly, "People already think you did." I slammed the door when I went upstairs, but he didn't follow. When I checked social media later, a new video was spreading. Someone had filmed me at the wedding laughing on the balcony. The caption read, "She disappeared for the view." Hundreds of comments flooded in. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I looked up and saw Aaron standing in the doorway. I said, "Did you see this? They're making me out to be the villain." He said, "You said that yourself the first night." I told him he could at least defend me. He said, "You built this image. I'm not tearing it down for you." I shouted that he was cruel, that he was letting people humiliate his wife. He said, "You've been doing that fine on your own." Then he turned and went back to the guest room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to faint mechanical sounds, the soft feed of paper through something. I got up, padded down the hall, and saw light under his door. I pushed it open. He was standing by the printer, stacking documents into a box labeled Household Records. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Archiving." I said, "You mean spying?" He said, "Proof isn't spying." I reached for the box, but he placed his hand on it calmly. "Don't," he said. His tone wasn't threatening, just absolute. I stepped back. "Why are you doing this to us?" I asked. He said, "I'm not doing anything to us. I'm just writing down what already happened." I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. He picked up the box and set it on the top shelf of the closet. The latch clicked softly. "You're making me into the enemy," I whispered. He said, "You made yourself into a story." When I went back to bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I told myself I still had control, that I could fix it if I just found the right words. But every word felt smaller, like the air itself was recording me. Sunday afternoon was supposed to be family day, the kind that fixes small cracks before they spread. Nora had planned a picnic at the community park, invited Clara too, said it would be good to breathe. I almost didn't go, but I wanted to prove things were normal. Aaron came separately, of course. He arrived on time, shirt pressed, that same unreadable calm stretched across his face. Clara hugged him first. She greeted me politely, like you greet someone from church you don't quite trust. We spread a blanket under a tree, unpacked food, and tried to sound cheerful. Nora made small talk about her kids, the weather, work gossip. Clara complimented the pie I brought without tasting it. Aaron said little, just listened. When Nora asked if things had cooled down since the wedding, I laughed too loud and said everything was fine. Clara tilted her head slightly and said, "Fine isn't always the truth." I told her it was close enough. Aaron didn't intervene. Theo ran in circles with Nora's children while I tried to keep the conversation light. Clara mentioned that Aaron had stopped by her house last week to drop off a few boxes. She said he told her it was temporary storage. I froze mid-bite and asked what boxes. She said, "Just files, some personal things." Aaron kept his eyes on the children and said, "It's nothing important." My voice came out sharper than I meant when I asked why he needed to store anything away from home. He said, "Some things need distance to stay safe." Nora cleared her throat and offered more lemonade, trying to diffuse the silence. I forced a smile and said Aaron was being dramatic, that we were fine. Clara looked at me, calm and steady, and said, "He's being careful." That word echoed through me like a warning. I told her not to worry about our marriage. She said, "I'm not worried, I'm observing." After that, no one spoke much. The kids played, the wind picked up, and I sat there pretending to scroll my phone. The screen reflected my face like a mirror I didn't want to see. When it was time to leave, Aaron folded the blanket neatly, told Theo to help his aunt pack up, and walked to the car without waiting for me. Clara hugged me goodbye and whispered, "You should think about what you're defending." I smiled and told her I already had. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. I checked Aaron's closet while he showered. Half his clothes were gone, the hangers spaced evenly like he'd measured them. On the top shelf sat one of the labeled boxes from his archive, this one marked Bank. A smaller one sat behind it, labeled Utilities. A strip of tape sealed it shut, and underneath, a tiny USB was stuck to the lid with clear tape, dated from last month. I hesitated before touching it. The water stopped upstairs. My pulse jumped. I peeled the USB off and slipped it into my robe pocket, just as his footsteps creaked down the stairs. I hurried to the kitchen, pretending to pour water. When he walked in, he looked at me, then at the counter. Couldn't sleep, he asked. I said, just thirsty. He nodded, took a sip of his own coffee and said, you should rest. Tomorrow's early. After he went to bed, I opened my laptop and plugged the USB in. It contained folders named by dates, each holding short audio files labeled Notes. I clicked one. His voice filled the room, calm, detached, June 12th. She returned from balcony at 7:16. Witness, Nora. Statement, laughter confirmed. My stomach turned. I clicked another, July 2nd. Conversation with Eli recorded in kitchen. Key phrase, he's just jealous. I closed the laptop so fast the screen flickered. I sat there shaking, more angry than scared. He was recording me, cataloguing me. I told myself it was illegal, obsessive. But the part that hurt more was how methodical it sounded, like I was a project he was finishing. I wanted to confront him right then, but my hands trembled too much. The next morning I tried to act normal. Made breakfast, asked if he wanted eggs. He said he had an early meeting. I asked if it was downtown again. He said, you check my calendar more than I do. I said it was hard not to when he left reminders lying around. He smiled faintly. Then you know where I'll be. After he left, I called Nora. I told her Aaron was crossing lines, recording things. She said softly, maybe he's protecting himself. I said, from me? She didn't answer. That silence hurt worse than anything. I spent the day cleaning, opening drawers, trying to find more evidence. Every folder was too neat, every paper labeled. Household A, Archive B, joint account. Each time I saw his handwriting, I felt smaller. He wasn't hiding mess. He was hiding order. When Aaron came home that evening, I pretended everything was fine. Dinner was ready, music low, Theo coloring in the living room. He said thank you, sat down, and ate quietly. I tried to start small talk, asked about work, about his mother. He nodded politely, offered short answers. Finally I said, I found your recordings. His fork paused midair. Which ones? He asked. I said, you know which. He set the fork down, wiped his hands and said, then you also know I'm not crazy. I demanded to know why. He said, because memory fades when people twist it. I said he was paranoid. He said, you called it performance before. Performances need an audience. I told him he was cruel. He said, I'm careful. I grabbed the laptop and slammed it shut, said I was done being treated like evidence. He looked at me for a long time, then said, you still think this is about punishment? I asked what else it could be. He said, closure. Then he stood and walked to the door. I asked where he was going. He said, someplace I can finish properly. He left without slamming the door. The sound of it closing was too soft for how heavy it felt. I stood there for a long time before realizing Theo had stopped coloring and was watching me. I told him everything was fine. He nodded, like he already knew it wasn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Aaron to text that he was sorry, that he was coming home. Instead, the only notification that appeared was a system alert from his shared account. File upload complete. Archive B synced successfully. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The next morning, I saw him in the driveway, putting 2 suitcases in his trunk. He looked up and saw me at the window. He didn't wave. I ran outside in my robe, asked if he was leaving. He said, just staying somewhere quieter. I asked if it was my fault. He said, it's our story's fault. Then he got in the car. The tires crunched on the gravel as he pulled away. I stood barefoot on the pavement, gripping the USB still hidden in my pocket. The morning light made everything look too sharp, too exposed. For the first time, I wondered if all his calm wasn't coldness, but a kind of warning I had ignored until it was too late. The house felt hollow without him, like the walls were listening for a voice that never came. His side of the bed stayed untouched, the sheets perfectly smooth. Every morning I checked my phone for a message, but nothing ever came. just work updates and cheerful notifications that belonged to a different life. I kept telling myself he needed time, that space would fix everything, but every empty morning felt like a decision he'd already made. I started posting again, pretending things were fine. Pictures of dinners I didn't eat, captions about new beginnings. People sent comments full of concern, but I liked them anyway. Validation felt safer than silence. I told everyone Aaron and I were taking space. Writing it made it sound reasonable, almost mature. Then Nora called. She said she'd seen Aaron downtown, standing outside an office with a man in a suit. He looked calm, she said, too calm. I joked that maybe he'd taken up meditation. She didn't laugh. He's getting ready for something, she said quietly. I told her she was paranoid. After we hung up, I couldn't stop picturing the image she painted. Aaron, patient, organized, waiting. That night I poured wine and stared at his last note on the fridge. Bring forms. I still didn't know what forms he meant. I checked our shared calendar. A new event appeared. Personal meeting, 3 p.m. Friday. I texted him asking what it was. He read the message but didn't reply. The next day was worse. Someone from the wedding posted a photo of me and Eli again, this time with a caption that said, "She vanished, he searched." It had hundreds of comments. I reported it, deleted tags, but the damage was already done. Even my co-workers looked at me differently. When I got home, the blinds were half closed and Aaron's car sat in the driveway. He was standing by the window when I walked in, as if he'd been waiting for me to arrive. Theo ran straight into his arms. Aaron hugged him, then looked at me and said, "We need to talk." His voice was soft, deliberate. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table where he used to fix things, and I used to plan parties. "I've made my decision," he said. I tried to keep my voice calm. "You're ready to talk this out?" He shook his head. "No, I'm ready to handle it properly." The way he said "properly" made the air feel heavy. I asked what that meant. "You'll see soon," he said. I reached across the table for his hand, but he pulled back. "You can't just walk away," I said. "We have a child." He nodded. "That's why I'm doing it carefully." I told him he was overreacting, that he couldn't destroy everything over one night. He said, "It wasn't one night. It was every choice you defended." He stood, placed a folded page on the counter. "Tomorrow you'll get what you've been asking for." I grabbed the paper. It was blank. "This isn't funny," I said. He didn't smile. "It's not meant to be." Then he walked out. I called after him, demanding answers, but the door closed softly behind him. I stood there for a long time before realizing Theo was watching from the hallway. I told him Daddy just needed air. He nodded like he'd already guessed that wasn't true. That night, I couldn't stop pacing. Every drawer I opened smelled faintly of toner and paper. I finally found the small key taped under his desk. My hand shook as I unlocked the drawer labeled Household Records. Inside were folders, bank, utilities, savings, and one that said Proof. I opened it. There were screenshots of messages with Eli, photos from the wedding, receipts from the bar, even timestamps printed from social media. At the back was a single note in Aaron's writing. "Truth survives noise." I dropped the folder, heart racing. My phone buzzed, a message from Nora. "He's meeting someone at the courthouse tomorrow." I stared at the words until they blurred. Courthouse. The blank paper, the proper way. My chest tightened. I tried calling him, left a message saying we could fix everything, that I'd delete every post, that I'd make it right. No response. Around midnight, I heard a faint notification from our shared account. File uploaded successfully. Archive B. I didn't open it. By morning, the house looked smaller. I made Theo breakfast, kissed his head, and told him everything would be okay. When I came back to the kitchen, my phone buzzed again. A calendar alert. Meeting confirmed. Courthouse Plaza, 9:30 a.m. I stood there staring at the screen, my reflection warped in the glass. Maybe he was bluffing, maybe he wanted me to panic, but deep down I knew. Aaron didn't bluff, he planned, and whatever he'd been planning was already waiting for me somewhere, with my name printed neatly on the envelope. When I reached the courthouse plaza, Aaron was already there, calm, composed, standing beside a woman holding a folder. The wind kept lifting the edges of his papers. I called his name, but he didn't turn. The clerk stepped forward and handed me an envelope. My fingers went numb as I opened it. Divorce petition, temporary custody, financial orders, all signed, dated the morning after the wedding. People nearby glanced over, recognizing us. Aaron met my eyes once, said quietly, "It's done," then walked away while the world tilted around me.